In the spring of 1996, two commercial climbing expeditions set out to reach the summit of Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world, standing at 8,848 meters above sea level on the border between Nepal and Tibet, China. The expedition was made up of experienced guides, seasoned climbers, and paying clients with varying levels of expertise, all drawn by the allure of standing on top of the world. At the heart of the mission were two highly respected mountaineers leading their respective teams. Rob Hall from Adventure Consultants and Scott Fisher from Mountain Madness. Both men were pioneers in the field of guided Everest climbs and had built reputations for excellence, safety, and leadership in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. However, an unspoken rivalry simmered beneath the surface, influencing decisions that would later prove critical when disaster struck. Mount Everest is not only a physical challenge but also a test of endurance, judgment, and preparation, where even the smallest mistake can have irreversible consequences. Climbers often attempt the summit during a short window in May, when weather conditions are slightly more favorable, though never entirely predictable or safe. On May 10th, both teams began their final push from Camp 4, located at approximately 7,900 meters, aiming to reach the summit before descending before nightfall. Rob Hall, known for his disciplined and methodical approach, led his team with precision, emphasizing strict timelines and adherence to safety protocols. Scott Fisher, on the other hand, had a more relaxed style, encouraging autonomy among his climbers, which some argue contributed to the chaos that followed. As they ascended, the first signs of trouble began to appear. Delays due to slow-moving climbers, equipment malfunctions, and unexpected congestion on the route. Despite these early warnings, the drive to reach the summit kept pushing them forward, as if the peak itself held a magnetic pull too strong to resist. By midday, Rob Hall successfully reached the summit, marking a personal achievement, but he knew descent would be just as crucial as the climb up. Scott Fisher arrived shortly after, having pushed hard to keep pace, while several of their clients still struggled to make it to the top. The weather, which had appeared stable in the morning, began to change rapidly, bringing with it a violent snowstorm that would soon engulf the entire mountain. Strong winds exceeding 130 kilometers per hour, combined with temperatures plummeting to -51 degrees Celsius, created a deadly environment for anyone exposed. Many climbers found themselves caught high on the mountain without adequate shelter, visibility, or the strength to continue down. Communication between the groups became increasingly difficult as radios failed and climbers became disoriented in the blizzard. Some lost their way completely, wandering aimlessly through the white void, unaware that each passing minute brought them closer to hypothermia or death. The lack of coordination between the two teams meant there was no unified plan for emergency response or evacuation. Andy Harris, one of Hall's guides, was last seen near Camp 3 trying to descend but disappeared into the storm without a trace. Yasuko Namba, a climber from Japan who had successfully reached the summit, attempted to descend alone but eventually stopped moving, freezing to death just meters from safety. Doug Hansen, a client from the Adventure Consultants team, stayed with Rob Hall longer than planned, delaying their descent until it was too late to escape the worst of the storm. Meanwhile, Scott Fisher descended toward Camp 2 but encountered another lost climber and chose to assist him, leaving himself vulnerable to the cold. Beck Weathers, another client, was left for dead during the night but miraculously survived long enough to be rescued the following day. The tragedy was not caused by a single mistake, but by a series of poor decisions, miscalculations, and unforeseen circumstances that compounded over time. One major issue was the decision to begin the summit attempt on the same day, leading to bottlenecks and delays at critical points along the route. Another factor was the disregard for the turnaround time, the moment when climbers must begin their descent regardless of progress, to avoid being caught in darkness or bad weather. Communication breakdowns between the two teams prevented coordinated efforts that could have saved lives. Equipment failures, including oxygen regulators and radios, further isolated climbers and reduced their ability to call for help. Inexperience among some of the clients also played a role, as many lacked the physical conditioning and technical skills needed to handle the harsh conditions. Weather forecasts had suggested a stable window for the climb, but the rapid onset of the storm caught everyone off guard. Had the team started their descent even 2 hours earlier, some experts believe the outcome might have been very different. Ultimately, the tragedy served as a painful reminder of how little control humans truly have in the face of nature's power. It also sparked a global conversation about the ethics and risks of commercialized mountaineering. The events of May 10 and 11, 1996, reshaped how Everest expeditions are planned and executed today. They highlighted the importance of leadership, teamwork, and humility when facing the world's tallest and most unforgiving peak. And they reminded the world that the cost of ambition, when unchecked, can be measured in human lives. 8 lives were lost during that historic storm on Mount Everest in 1996, 5 from Rob Hall's Adventure Consultants team and 3 from Scott Fisher's Mountain Madness group. Among the deceased was Yasuko Namba, one of the few Japanese women to attempt the summit, whose body was later found seated silently near Camp 2, as if she had accepted her fate with quiet dignity. Rob Hall, who successfully reached the summit, became stranded with Doug Hansen at the Hillary Step, where he remained for hours, maintaining radio contact with his wife Jen Arnold, who was waiting at base camp. In a heartbreaking moment, Hall pleaded for help but had no strength left to continue, dying still conscious while Jan listened helplessly to his final moments. Doug Hansen, a schoolteacher from the United States and a client of Adventure Consultants, was driven by the dream of reaching the top after failing in a previous attempt, but paid for that second chance with his life. Andy Harris, the young British guide from Adventure Consultants, vanished during the descent and was never seen again, with some reports suggesting he may have panicked and walked in the wrong direction, lost in the blizzard. Scott Fisher, despite being an extremely experienced climber, also lost his life on the way down, likely while trying to assist another lost client named Charlie Mace, who survived thanks to Fisher's efforts. Yasuko Namba, who had already reached the summit, tried to descend alone and, disoriented by the cold and lack of oxygen, simply stopped walking just a few meters from Camp 2, where she might have been rescued if found earlier. The 5th member of the Adventure Consultants team to lose his life was Beck Weathers, a Texas-based doctor who defied all odds by initially surviving the night on the mountain even after being declared dead by fellow climbers. Weathers woke up hours later, injured and freezing, and managed to drag himself to a safer location where he was rescued the next day by an improvised rescue team. Another victim was Tsewang Smanla, a Sherpa from the Mountain Madness team, who died near Camp 3, leaving behind a family that relied on his income to support their home. 2 other members of the Mountain Madness team also lost their lives. Scott Fisher himself and Dorje, one of the Sherpas accompanying the group, whose body was recovered days later. In addition to those who died, several others suffered severe cases of hypothermia, cerebral edema, and later required amputations due to extreme cold exposure, including Beck Weathers, who lost his nose, hands, and part of his legs. Searches for the bodies began the next day as soon as the weather improved, but many of the climbers remained buried under snow, impossible to recover, becoming part of the mountain itself. What should have been a day of achievement and celebration turned into one of the darkest chapters in the history of commercial mountaineering, leaving families shattered and dreams buried beneath meters of ice. In the days following the tragedy, the international mountaineering community was shaken, and questions about what really happened on May 10th began to emerge with increasing urgency. Journalists, experts, and families of the victims demanded explanations about why so many people died on a mountain so well studied and frequently climbed. Rob Hall and Scott Fisher were respected leaders known for their technical skills and experience, so why did they make decisions that led to the deaths of so many? An informal investigation began among the survivors, who gave testimonies about the events of that day, revealing judgment failures, overconfidence, and even rivalries between the leaders. Some critics argued that commercial pressure may have influenced the choices made on the mountain, as clients paid enormous sums to reach the summit, and canceling the attempt would be economically damaging. Additionally, the rise in commercial expeditions on Everest during the 1990s brought a surge of inexperienced climbers, increasing the overall risk of accidents. Lack of clear regulation on who could climb Everest and under what conditions was also questioned, as many clients lacked adequate training to face such extreme conditions. Some experts argued that over-reliance on artificial oxygen created a false sense of security, allowing less physically prepared individuals to reach altitudes where the human body is not designed to function. The absence of communication between the groups, or rather, the complete lack of it, was another important factor, as there was no coordination between the two teams despite the large number of people on the mountain. Although safety protocols existed, many were ignored or adapted according to the situation, compromising the effectiveness of preventive measures. Weather forecasts, although available, were not interpreted correctly, and the decision to climb on the 10th was based more on optimistic predictions than on observable reality. The lack of a clear evacuation or emergency response plan proved fatal when the storm hit the group, catching everyone unprepared. As the months passed, debates about ethics in commercial mountaineering intensified, with many experts questioning whether Everest should remain accessible to anyone willing to pay. From 1996 onward, commercial mountaineering on Everest was never quite the same, as the tragedy served as a necessary wake-up call for the entire industry. Companies began revising their safety protocols, redefining minimum fitness and experience requirements for clients. The idea that anyone with money could climb Everest was called into question, and today stricter requirements are applied to applicants. The issue of turnaround time, the moment climbers must begin their descent regardless of progress, became a central topic in expedition planning discussions, helping prevent repetitions of the mistake that cost so many lives. Oxygen and communication equipment were improved, focusing on greater autonomy and resistance to the mountain's extreme conditions. Nepalese authorities also introduced new rules, such as mandatory hiring of certified guides and a ban on solo climbs without technical support. There was also a growing emphasis on training Sherpas, recognizing their essential role in both logistics and expedition safety. Stories like that of Beck Weathers, who survived against all odds, became inspiring examples of human survival instinct in extreme situations. Documentaries, books and films were produced about the event, including Everest, released in 2015, which brought back to light the mistakes made and the lessons learned. John Krakauer's book Into Thin Air, written by one of the survivors, became a reference on the tragedy and is considered one of the most important records of modern mountaineering history. Global media began covering Everest expeditions with greater attention, highlighting not only achievements but also inherent risks. Awareness of the environmental impact of high turnover of people on Everest also grew, with movements to reduce waste and protect the fragile ecosystem of the region. Today, guides are more cautious, clients better informed, and expeditions better organized, all thanks to the painful lessons learned that year. Although the 1996 tragedy was devastating, it also brought significant progress to the world of mountaineering, potentially saving other lives in the years that followed. The legacy of those 8 lives lost should not be forgotten, but remembered as a constant warning that nature does not forgive recklessness and that humility before Everest is the greatest virtue of all who face it. Among the survivors of that terrible blizzard are stories that mix luck, determination, and miracles, such as that of Beck Weathers, who resisted for hours exposed to extreme cold even after being declared dead by colleagues. Weathers woke up in the middle of the snow, with blurred vision and a frozen body, and guided by a primal instinct, managed to crawl to Camp 2, where he was rescued by a rescue team. His recovery was slow and painful, with several amputations, but he became a symbol of resilience and perseverance, sharing his story through lectures and books. Stuart Hutchison, a client from Mountain Madness, also survived, but left traumatized, describing in interviews how the blizzard seemed like a white tunnel with no end. Lena Gelton, one of the guides from Mountain Madness, had to be rescued after becoming disoriented during the descent, but survived and returned to climbing other mountains, always with more caution. Neil Beidelman, who led part of Fisher's team, became a central figure in rescuing survivors and later wrote about his experience, emphasizing the importance of unity in extreme situations. Jan Arnold, Rob Hall's widow, decided to tell her husband's story in interviews and collaborated with documentaries, keeping alive the memory of someone who dedicated his life to mountaineering. She said in one instance that Rob knew the risks but believed he could control the unpredictable, a belief that ultimately cost him his life. The daughter of Rob Hall, born a few months after the tragedy, grew up hearing stories about the father hero who died doing what he loved. For many of the survivors, the experience left deep scars, both physical and emotional, and some never returned to Everest. But others saw it as proof that life is worth living courageously and with purpose, even in the face of danger. The letters, messages, and testimonies exchanged between participants of the expedition and their families became valuable documents to understand the human impact of the tragedy. They reveal not only fear and pain, but also love, loyalty, and a sincere desire to understand what happened. These human stories are just as important as the technical facts, because they remind us that behind every name on the list of victims, there were dreams, passions, and people who left a void. The 1996 Everest tragedy was not just a story of mistakes and bad weather. It was a story about ourselves, our choices, ambitions, and limits. It shows us that even with all the technology, experience, and preparation, we are always at the mercy of nature, and arrogance can be deadly. Throughout these 10 sessions, we explored the facts, causes, errors, lives lost, and stories that survived the storm. We met men and women who followed their dreams, some reaching the summit, others paying an irreversible price for it. We learned that Everest is not just a mountain, but a mirror reflecting our deepest motivations and our relationship with risk. This story serves as a warning to those seeking extreme adventures. Prepare yourself, respect the signs, and always be ready to turn back, even if it means giving up the summit. Because in the end, the real victory is not reaching the top, but returning alive with the lessons learned. If you enjoy true stories of endurance, adventure, and tragedy, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who is interested in mountaineering or great human challenges. Subscribe to the channel to receive more content like this, stories that go beyond the surface and connect us with the most human side of us. Leave a comment telling us which part of the story caught your attention the most, or if you've ever imagined climbing Everest. Don't forget to click the bell icon to receive notifications and follow all the videos we will release about adventures, exploration, and the limits of human beings. After all, Everest is still there, majestic and challenging, waiting for those who dare to face it with respect, courage, and awareness. And you, would you have the courage to face the top of the world? Or would you prefer to admire it from afar, like many wise ones who learned from the mistakes of the past? Keep watching to learn more about other tragedies and achievements in the world of mountains, and remember, the most important thing is not to reach the top, but to return to tell the story.